Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our morning panel to discuss why digital literacy matters more than ever. Our moderator is Josh Hodges, Chief Customer Officer at NCOA.
I love it. I love the energy. Good morning. It's Friday. What a conference. I hope you've all had an opportunity to learn from each other, learn from our wonderful speakers, and really have the opportunity to just engage and be in communion so that we can actually learn and take back these lessons home. Have you? Yes. All right. 72 hours ago, hard to believe, 72 hours ago, 100 of us were on the Hill talking about aging issues. 48 hours ago, our illustrious CEO, Ramsey Alwyn, I'm not saying illustrious just because our performance reviews are next week, but I'm saying, whatever. But our illustrious CEO challenged us to talk about aging and bring these stories up. We heard from a great panel talking about the last 75 years of aging in America, and that was amazing. We heard from our ACL colleagues talking about the federal perspective. 38 hours ago, we danced, and we'll leave that alone. There are photos. We'll leave you can review those. There are some serious dancers here, and there are also people who just enjoyed themselves, which I thoroughly appreciate. 24 hours ago, we talked about social isolation. We talked about the opportunity to address loneliness as a cohort, a group, and that leads us to today. We're going to talk about digital literacy, but before we do, this is our last plenary, so I want to just take 1 second and give a couple shout outs and thank yous. Because this conference, in my experience, the smoother a conference goes, the harder it was to put on. And this conference was incredibly smooth. So, the people at the back of the room, hello people, I can't see but you're waving. Those are our conference leaders. They have worked tirelessly for weeks and weeks and weeks to pull this off. Thank you to all of our speakers. More than 100 people have spoken at this conference. Thank you. And thank you for being here, because the work we do every day only matters because you're out there doing the hard work. You're out there engaging with the older adults. You're out there engaging with the caregivers. So thank you for coming. Thank you for making this a priority. And thank you for engaging in such an important endeavor as service to older adults and caregivers. So thank you. We're here to talk this morning about the importance of digital literacy. And when we think about engaging in digital literacy, you really have to think about it in 3 different parts. First, there's access. Do you have access to the technology? Everybody take out their phone. Everybody has access to technology. But this is not a universal life experience. A lot of people are still missing that access. There's also the infrastructure necessary to support these individuals, especially broadband access, effectively a public utility right now. And then there's a third piece that we're going to engage with today about digital literacy. Do you know how to use the device in the most effective way? And do you know how to prevent being a victim of a scam or fraud? And I think I'm digital literate. Then I talked to some of my colleagues, and I'm not digital literate. So I'm going to learn as much as anybody else in this room today. So as we talk about digital literacy, let's first talk about the definition. So it is the ability to understand and use the technology information effectively. And the effectively is really, really important, because it's not just about the turning on the device. It's really understanding how to engage with that device itself. It is about finding, evaluating, creating, and communicating information and navigating the online world safely. Because ultimately, that's what we're talking about. We had an interesting pre-conversation just a second ago about the prevalence of scams and fraud and how we're all getting them. And it's so common for people to fall victim to those scams. In fact, we're going to have somebody talk about that a little bit later this morning. But it is such an important aspect to understand how to navigate that world successfully. It's about how to use the devices, how to interpret the information, and how to be safe online as you engage with your community, as you engage with your doctors, as you engage with whatever you choose to engage with and bring together to address the social isolation we talked about yesterday, to address that loneliness. I am joined by a very phenomenal panel, and it is my pleasure to introduce Colleen McClain, who is a senior researcher at Pew Research and is going to be talking about the digital divide itself. Melissa Lanning, the executive director of the Better Business Bureau Institute of Marketplace Trust, is going to talk about scams and fraud. And then Jeanette Manzano, for one of our local partners from Dallas County, welcome Jeanette, who's going to talk a lot about the work they've done in Dallas to address the digital divide. So, enough of me talking, let's get to the experts. So, Colleen, perhaps you can start us off with some statistics. What do we know about the state of digital literacy today?
Yes, well, I want to start by saying I'm so excited to be here with all of you to share some of our findings. We at Pew Research Center are nonpartisan, non-advocacy. Hopefully many of you are familiar with our work, but if you're not, you're going to get a very quick rundown today. And I'm going to be sharing with you survey findings from a variety of surveys we've conducted over the past few years. These are all nationally representative of the American public. Not going to get into how we do our work because I've only got 7 minutes. So I'm going to jump right in. And I'm going to start with access. Now, as Josh just mentioned, this is part of the picture. It's foundational, but it's not the whole picture. We're going to get into talking about confidence and knowledge and how people are actually using and understanding the technology they have. But I want to start with access. We at Pew Research Center have been studying the digital divide for decades now. And if I showed you these trends over time, you'd see this uphill climb in things like smartphone ownership, which is in blue, subscribing to broadband high-speed internet at home, which is in green. And you can see here that vast majorities of US adults have access to these, and there are some age differences. Now you'll see these breaks throughout, and I'm really going to focus on the bottom row here, which is the 65 and older group, right? And so you see that older adults are less likely to have smartphones. They're relatively less likely to subscribe to home broadband than, say, those who are 30 to 64. But I'll point out that these are still majorities, right? So about 3/4 of older adults have a smartphone. 7 in 10 subscribe to broadband at home. And we also ask people about the frequency of their internet use, and some older adults are telling us they're constantly online. Now, it's a smaller share. It's about 15% of adults 65 and older compared to some of their younger counterparts, but it's there. And so people, older adults are using technology, which is no surprise to any of you. However, as Josh mentioned, there are a lot of different elements that go into the digital literacy picture, and I'm going to present to you with just a few today. In one of our surveys, actually in a number of our surveys, and the most recent being in 2024, we asked people a couple of related concepts around confidence and independent use of devices. And so what you're seeing here is when we asked people, when you get a new computer or a smartphone or another device, do you usually need help to set it up? Do you need somebody else to set it up or show you how to use it? Or are you able to do that all on your own? And you can see here that a majority of people say they're able to do it on their own. About 1/4 say they need help. And there are some age differences here. So older adults are more likely to say they need somebody else to help them set up a new device, show them how to use it. And so that's 55% of adults 65 and older. So you can see here that that support may be really key for some older adults in using and knowing how to use the devices that they have. Another picture, another piece of this picture is confidence, right? I have these devices, I need to do certain things on them, but how confident am I in really, knowing how to use them? Knowing how to use them in a way that helps me do what I need to do. And here, so you're seeing what people said when we asked them this. Again, this is most recently in 2024. The takeaway here is across age groups, actually vast majorities do say, yeah, I'm at least somewhat confident that I'm able to use computers, smartphones, other electronic devices to do the things I need to do. But there are, again, some age differences, and you can see again at the bottom that about 1/4 of adults 65 and older say, I'm really only a little confident, or I'm not at all confident that I can use these devices to do the things that I need to do. Now, this tells us about the day-to-day, right? How people feel navigating their online lives, the kind of nuts and bolts of how they're going through their days using technology. Another element of this matters is how to respond when things go awry. Now, my colleague Melissa is going to talk a lot about scams. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say there. I'm just going to show you one data point. This was from a 2023 survey, and one of the questions we asked people is, again, about confidence. Do you know what steps to take if your personal information was hacked or stolen online? So kind of a little more specific of a question. And I think the takeaway here is that people overall are pretty split. When we ask all adults this, it's about half of adults who say they're very or somewhat confident they'd know what to do if this happened. It's about 4 in 10 who say they're not very confident, or not at all confident. And there's some age differences here, but actually, if you look at that bottom row, the takeaway is the picture's pretty similar for older adults as well, right? So about 4 in 10 adults 65 and older say, I'm not too confident, I'm not at all confident that I know what I would do if my personal information was hacked or stolen. Now, we have a lot more data coming out on this topic soon. We're digging into it now, and so stay tuned if you're interested in this topic for more data from Pew. I want to just touch on a few more things, and then get to my other colleagues' presentations here. One of them is knowledge. Now, knowledge isn't the whole picture of your daily interactions, of the sense of how digitally literate you are, but it is an important one. We have, at various points over time, asked people a set of knowledge questions, almost a quiz, if you will, although we don't want it to feel like a test, about digital knowledge, everything from secure passwords to AI, to whether you know how to identify a phishing attempt. And there's a lot on this slide. I don't want you to worry about taking it in. What I want you to take away is that there are some places that we see really big age differences in knowledge, where adults 65 and older are less knowledgeable about some of these topics, but then there are also some places where we don't see such big differences. And I've put arrows to 2 that I want to highlight. These 3 at the top are places you can just see in the spread of the dots, right? There are big age differences. One of those is on knowing how large language models work. So something like ChatGPT, it's about 30 points. And we get even bigger differences for things like knowing what a deep fake is, or knowing what 2-factor authentication is. These are pretty technical things, right? It varies among the public. But there are other places where the differences are not so big, right? So the second arrow I have there is, can you identify the most secure password from a list of 4? Those differences across age are not very big. Vast majorities of older and younger adults alike can do this. Now, I mentioned AI, and I want to close with just touching on a few of our findings on this topic. AI has become a big part of the digital literacy conversation, right? We know that its use in daily life is increasing, right? It's something that is in the national conversation in a way that we really haven't seen it before. You could almost say we're at an inflection point, in terms of the use and prevalence of AI in our society. And we at Pew Research Center recently went much deeper. We committed to going a lot deeper on AI and surveying the American public at regular intervals about their experiences, their hopes, their fears, what they've heard. And we really wanted to include sort of use, awareness, understanding measures as part of this. I'm just going to show you really quickly a few findings here. What you're seeing here is a question we asked about AI chatbots, right? So perhaps some of you have used ChatGPT or other chatbots. You've probably heard about them, and what you're seeing here is that most US adults have. So 28% have heard a lot, 44% have heard a little. Again, age differences, right? We see about half of adults 65 and older have heard at least a little bit about chatbots. Fewer have heard a lot. And we didn't just ask about awareness, we asked about use as well. And what I want to point your attention to is that a quarter of adults ages 50 to 64 and about 1 in 10 adults 65 and over have ever used one of these chatbots. And so this is something people are using, it's happening, and it's a piece of the conversation that we need to understand more about. I'll leave you with this last finding from our work on AI. And as I mentioned, this is a place where we want to really understand people's experiences, their feelings, their understanding, right? And this is actually a question that we've been asking over time. This is one of our core measures about AI. We ask people, are you thinking about the increased use of AI in daily life? Are you more concerned than excited? Are you more excited than concerned? Are you equally concerned and excited? So you can think about what you might say. And as you can see here, the American public, and older adults too, lean towards concern, right? About half of adults say they're more concerned than excited. It's 59% of those 65 and older. This pattern is the same across age groups, although we definitely see less excitement as people get older. And this is something, the concern is increasing over time. So I'm not showing you it over time, but the awareness of AI is increasing. Concern has increased since we started asking about it. And I think this really highlights the complex and complicated feelings people have about how AI is being used in their lives, together with the understanding, the awareness, the literacy questions. This is really, really critical for us. It's the new frontier, a new digital divide that may be emerging that we really are looking forward to understanding more about in the future. I'm going to stop there. Could talk for hours, but I want to pass it over to my other colleagues.
Well, thank you very much. So I really appreciate how you talked about how there are some similarities between the different age groups, and there are some stark differences.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that in a few minutes. So, Melissa, most of us know the Better Business Bureau from a sign of a particular business reputation or trustworthiness, but talk to us a little bit about the Institute for Marketplace Trust and the work you're doing on scams prevention, how it aligns to this work.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I am with the Better Business Bureau. Most of you have probably heard of us. We're known for basically taking information about, complaints about businesses. We've been doing that for over 100 years. About a decade ago, we started to see an increase in scams. And we've since then started to really dig in and do a lot more work around that. Our mission is to advance marketplace trust. Obviously, fraud and scams is a real issue when it comes to trying to foster that trustworthy marketplace, if you will. So what we did is we actually built out a platform called BBB Scam Tracker, and I'm going to share some of the data with you today from that platform. It was, like I said, built originally in 2015. We rebuilt it in 2022 to become a reporting and a prevention platform. And what I mean by that is you can report scams, and this is a thing I'll say over and over again, please report scams, whether you lost money or not. It's really important to report that to FTC, FBI, BBB, whoever it is. It's really important that we understand what's going on. We collect that data. We do share it with the FTC, and we're working with the FBI to share it as well. What makes it a prevention platform is that we publish those narratives on the website. So you can actually go in and search by email or URL or phone number to find out if that suspicious thing that is targeting you was reported by somebody else. We estimated that people avoided about $43 million last year alone by coming into the platform and searching it. We do take out all of the personal information. All of that information is redacted, so none of your personal information is there. So I'm going to share some of the information that we're collecting there. So overall, just from a broad perspective on scams and fraud, FTC, who has a bigger bulk of the data than we do because we give all our data to them, said that in 2024, $12.5 billion was lost to scams. Now, I want to remind everyone, that is self-reported data, meaning that's what we know happened. That's because people reported it to us. There's a much larger section of people who never reported it, so that the issue is much bigger than that. From our own data, from the Better Business Bureau, we actually saw an increase. Sorry, I didn't mean to go quickly that. There you go. Okay, well, we saw a 30% increase in median dollar loss. So that doesn't mean we had more scams reported. It means that the amount of money people were losing went up 30%. And I apologize. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. That's significant. 30% increase year over year. And there's a story to be told around why that is. And I'm going to tell that story. So we do have a report called the BBB Scam Tracker Risk Report. It's free on our website for anyone to download. I'm only providing a few pieces of information from that today. This is broken out by age. So this is monetary loss by age. And so if you look at the very bottom, ages 65 plus, you can see that the median dollar loss is $160. That's higher than all the other age groups. So while that's very significant, I also want to say that it doesn't mean that older adults are the only ones being targeted. Everyone is being targeted by scams right now. Everybody's being impacted by scams. And the difference we see often is the types of scams that certain groups are being targeted by. Because some scam types are going to lead to higher monetary losses than other scam types. So for example, online shopping scams. How many people in here have been targeted by an online shopping scam? Okay. Yeah, they're pervasive. About 30% of everything that's reported to us is an online shopping scam. The median dollar loss, $75. And what I want to say here is when I talk about the riskiest scams for older adults, which we have in our report, that the median dollar loss is sort of, we're taking out the outliers. So some of the scams I'm talking about right here, people are losing hundreds of thousands of dollars to. And so just quickly on what we found, and we look at this, the way that we determine the riskiest scams is that we're looking at the volume of a specific scam type, the percentage of people who lost money to a specific scam type, and then that specific scam type, what was the median dollar loss? When they lost money, how much money did they lose? And so the top one, which is actually the #1 riskiest for everyone, all age groups, is investment crypto scams. These are the scams where somebody's reaching out, they're offering to make money for you, they're not a lot of risk, zero risk or very little risk, which we know is not, that's not how investments work. There's always risk, right? They make that, they overpromise, and cryptocurrency has become a big part of that. We're seeing a huge increase in cryptocurrency platforms, fake platforms, people being brought in to invest money in it, and I'll talk about that again in a second. Romance friendship scams, that's the #2 riskiest scam. Those are those ones where you meet somebody online and it's a relationship. They're building trust with you, and I'm going to talk more about that as well. Both of these scams have a very high median dollar loss. Many people are losing significant amounts, life-changing amounts of money in some cases. Home improvement scams, #3. That's when somebody shows up at your house, offers to do work, you give them your money, they never come back and do the work. Before I go to the next slide, I just want to mention tech support scams because of something Colleen said, which is that according to their data, there's that high 55% of older adults wanted help. Tech support scams, it's a little lower on the list, but it's something for us that's important on this conversation because what they're doing is they're popping something up on a computer saying, we can help you. You've got a problem with your computer, we need to help you. So it's sort of going very directly to the issue she brought up, which is, I need help and these people are gonna help me. And what they're gonna do typically is take money, they're gonna put malware on your computer, they're gonna steal your personal information and so forth. We all know about those, so I just wanted to bring that up. And then the last piece on this is just impersonation, letting people know that impersonation is the #1 tactic scammers use. They're gonna pretend to be your friend, your bank, your retailer, whoever it is, they're gonna try to pretend to be an authority figure. Whether it's they're pretending to be the IRS and you have back taxes. So pretending to be somebody legitimate is the #1 thing that they're gonna do. So I mentioned the top 2 risky scams here, and these are financial grooming scams. Both of the ones that I mentioned that have very high median dollar loss, those investment crypto scams and those romance friendship scams are what we call financial grooming scams. And I bring this up, and that's a big reason why we are seeing such a huge increase in monetary loss. Is because these individual scams that are being perpetrated are resulting in losses that sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes even more. Again, life-changing instances here. And so the way that this works, and so you guys have all heard of romance scams. BBB this year changed it from romance to friendship/romance scams. It's no longer just a romantic entanglement, right? This is somebody's just being a really good friend to somebody who needs a friend. And so what they do is they start a relationship online. It could be a random text. It could be online. You get a friend request. And then they fill a void in that person's life. A lot of times we're finding in our most recent research that life changes can make you more susceptible. You just got through a divorce. You just retired. You lost a spouse. You're lonely. Those are things where the scammer, and these are professional criminals who have a psychological playbook, and they use that to build this relationship, to fill that need. Once they get to know you, they fill that need. And then this may take weeks or months before they finally start to perpetrate the scam. Because by the time they've decided it's time to perpetrate the scam, you guys the relationship's very tight and there's a lot of trust there. And so then they start to drop hints about how they can help you make money. And however they perpetrate the scam, in a lot of cases, this is crypto, where they're telling you, hey, I made a lot of money, I can show you how to do it. They'll get them in, and so forth. And then it may be a year before that person realizes that it's a scam. They go in, they put in lots of money, and they try to get it back out, and suddenly they can't, and then they realize that it's crypto. So this is just, I wanted to highlight, this is one of the big things, and it's evolving all the time. So for example, what's really recent is employment scams and crypto. That's another way that they're starting the same kind of scam. So they're just, scammers are constantly changing their tactics. Another piece of information, what we do is we do survey research every year related to our risk report based on what we're seeing in the initial findings every year. We always talk about the financial impact of scams, but I just want to mention that there is a huge emotional impact here. And this is something BBB is working with a lot of partners to really address. And according to our research, 30% who were targeted by a scam said that their mental health was impacted. And then they also said we wanted more specifics on how it made them feel. 53% said they experienced anxiety, stress, and sometimes trauma. 54% said they lost trust, and just generally. 35% felt shame or embarrassment, and 29% lost confidence. So it's just important for us to understand, and I will say that we treat financial crime victims differently than we do treat other types of crime victims. We sometimes place the blame on the people who actually were victims. So just a resource I wanted to let you know that we created last year. We launched it, and we continue to update this. It's called our Scam Survival Toolkit. It was created as a holistic place for people who have just realized that they've been impacted by a scam and they don't know what to do. And rather than have to sort through pages of content about all this information, it asks you questions. Where do you live? Are you are you in the military? Because military has specific types of other resources. Are you a business? Are you a consumer? How did you pay? Are you sleeping at night? Afterwards. And what happens is once they go through this set of questions, it gives them a very personalized next steps. Here's what you need to do next. So if you lost your identity theft, there's specific things. If you paid by a gift card, you're not going to see all the different, not going to see credit card information. You're going to only see what happens if you paid by gift card. And there's also mental health resources in here. So we're very proud of this. We continue to push that out there. It's a great place to help people kind of come down from that really emotional state that they're in and help them take control and take some next steps. Just red flags. Knowledge is protective, and I'm going to probably talk about that more. But the more you know about scams, the better. But we don't like to tell people too much information. We like to try to give them very overall things for them to know that are protective for all scam types, which are things like, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. If you're being pressured to act quickly, that's a really big red flag. Pause the situation, talk to somebody. If they tell you not to talk to somebody else, that's a huge red flag. If you're directed to get off so if you start on LinkedIn and you're told that let's get on WhatsApp now, huge red flag, right? They don't want to stay on the same platform. If they're telling you specific ways to pay, or they're telling you to pay up front for things like lotteries, these are big red flags. Any unsolicited messages of any sort through any communication channel should be treated where you follow up separately. You go directly to the source versus responding. Unfortunately, online friends, just being careful how you make those friends and how you choose them and how you build that relationship. And then crypto ATMs, which is another thing that we're seeing a huge increase in. And so I'm going to turn it over now back, but thank you for letting me just give you an overview of our work.
Thank you. So, Jeanette, I know you've been addressing this issue at the local level, so help us ground this issue locally. The work you're doing in Dallas is your senior centers are part of the NCOA initiative with AT&T to provide digital literacy to hard-to-reach older adults. What are the lessons you've learned by participating in the program, and how have you been able to engage those older adults?
Yes, thank you for having me. I think to understand those lessons learned and how we implemented the digital literacy project is to understand who we serve. And I think that's across the board for any project that you're going to implement for older adults. And so at Dallas County, we go into underserved areas, those that have limited resources. Seniors often don't have internet access, they don't have access to technology. And so when this program came about, we were very, very excited and so grateful for the partnership that we have with NCOA. And so with that, as we implemented the digital literacy project, there's a couple things that we did. First, we identified a staff member who was tech savvy. Know that you can replicate this at any of your centers. Doesn't have to be a professional IT person. It just needs to be somebody who is knowledgeable of technology. We also had weekly sessions, 1 to 2 hours a week, and we had group sessions. We carried those sessions out group, as well as we had individual one-on-one opportunities. We really enjoyed the curriculum that NCOA and AT&T put together. It was very easy to implement, adaptable, fun for the seniors, and it was very basic. And so with the population that we serve, our underserved areas, this is just what we needed. And so what is most important in digital literacy and working with seniors is connecting. The best thing that you can do is start with a conversation. Meet them where they're at in their digital journey. So often we hear about programs or they're very exciting technology programs. Let's learn about computers or mobile devices. But you have to start with a conversation to know where they're at. Seniors have so many different levels of knowledge, so many different skill levels. That is a key factor in knowing how to move forward. So what we did is we spoke with them first, started a conversation, introduced a topic, one of the 4 topics, usually mobile devices was a popular one, as well as scams. And we would allow for open discussion. We would talk about and find out where they were at, what they knew, what they wanted to know, and we would go from there. And as simple as that, we would follow up the next week, and then we would repeat. Every other week, we would introduce a new topic. And so with seniors, repetition is key for them to understand what they're learning. And so I'm just going to kind of show you a couple of centers that we have. Our Emeritus Senior Center is located on a campus at a local community college, one of our wonderful partners, Dallas College. They've been very, there we go. They've been very supportive of the digital literacy program. They have volunteers as well, along with AT&T, supported us in our journey. And so with this senior center, this was a little dynamic, a little bit different than the other 2 that I'll be showing you, because they seniors there spoke English and Spanish. So there was various levels of knowledge as well as diversity. And so their favorite technology was digital devices. So you can see on the photos, they love the tablets. Those are provided by Dallas College. They love working on the iPads, so this was a very unique situation here. The next 2 centers were located in southern Dallas, and they were in pockets that really had limited resources. They did not have technology, they did not have internet, and so as interesting as this is, this was a smaller group, 15 to 20. And these seniors are up in age. They're older, 80s, some of them are in 90s. And they were former educators. So these are very smart, intelligent seniors. But even with them being smart, intelligent, and former educators, they did not have the knowledge of digital literacy. And so we went in there. What we found is they really enjoyed the Mobile Basics program. Why? Because that's the technology that they had. And oftentimes the seniors, they didn't even have that. A lot of them still have flip phones. And so, so teaching them on devices that they have versus devices that they don't have access to daily is very key, important. Again, start where they're at. And the last center is our Carver Heights Senior Center. This was our largest group. This center had 30 to 45 people, and yes, I say 45 people were in these group discussions and classes. This center was located in a church. They did not have internet access, they did not have computers, but they were concerned about security, and they wanted to know more about scams, as was previously discussed. They really enjoyed the mobile basics, and again, they needed technology. They needed to learn more about the technology that they use on a daily basis, which would be their mobile devices. And so here are some testimonials that I'd like to share. These are from our seniors that participated. I sometimes forget about how to do some of this. My son teaches me, but it leaves my ear when he leaves. I'm just glad that I can ask someone and practice this more. Some of the new stuff is wild to me. I bought a $1,000 computer that I barely know how to use at times. I appreciate getting to know more from this and not having to get my daughter every time to open up something up. We hear about this, right? Last, I love this one. I still don't know a whole lot, but I do feel more confident, which was previously mentioned, to try things on my own with my phone. Look, I found my house on Google Maps. And so they were so excited to learn those simple things. I think the two fears that the seniors had is one, scams, as previously mentioned, and two, they're afraid to mess up. They don't want to touch devices. They don't want to touch computers. They don't want to touch iPads. They're afraid to do things on their phone because they're like, what if I mess up? What do I do then? And so some of the areas that are kind of fun to hear about, what's exciting to them, which may be simple to us, is deleting messages. They're so excited they know how to delete messages. Taking photos. How often the seniors, they have these smartphones and they don't know how to take a photo. You know, and Googling their house. Look, I found my friend's house too. So these things are exciting to them. They're small, they're minute, but it starts them on their journey to digital literacy, and that's what's important. You have to start somewhere. And for us, it was the very basics. I will say that we did have, you know, a few seniors that were a little bit more along on their digital journey, but what we found with them is that they still had fear. They still had fear that they were going to be scammed out. And so they did not want to do a whole lot, even though they had some knowledge. So, and I will leave this with you. So digital literacy matters. And so this photo here is a Christmas card that one of our seniors made on her phone. She wanted to know how she can connect with her family. And we helped her make this digital Christmas card on her phone so she can send it to her family members. And so it's all about connecting. It's connecting the seniors with their family, connecting with others, connecting with their friends, because when they leave the senior centers or they leave where they are typically during the day, we don't know where they're at when they go. They may be staring at four walls. They may not be able to, they may not live with anybody, they may be isolated. And so digital literacy and these types of projects can really connect them to others and keep them socialized. And so some takeaways, be committed. It is a commitment when you start digital literacy. It is not a one and done deal. Don't expect to go in with a project and say, I'm going to do this for 3 weeks, and we're going to be done, and they're going to walk away and know everything. Absolutely not. It's a commitment to our seniors, and so finding that. Repetition is key. I think that's for everything with our seniors. You need to repeat a lot. 1 time is not enough, 2 times is not enough. You may need to do it 10 times, 20 times. So repetition is key. Be flexible and patient. I think this is important. Your lesson may not go as you planned. You may have an intent to go in there and say, I'm going to start teaching this computer class, and you may not be able to do that. You may need to start somewhere else. So being flexible and patient. Conversation, as I mentioned, use digestible terminology, provide opportunities for sharing. That was really key, because some of our seniors, doing it in the group sessions really allowed them an opportunity to see that, oh, I don't know this, and oh, my friend doesn't know this either, so I don't feel so bad. Instruction in one language is more efficient. Our first center, Emeritus Senior Center, again, I mentioned their English and Spanish, but if you're able to provide instruction in one English or one language, it's a little bit easier. Provide reassurance to them that they're not going to mess up. These days, pretty much everything is an undo. You can undo a lot of things. And so at least try. You know, if you need help, let us know. And lastly, meet them where they are in their digital journey. I can't stress that enough. We have to meet them where they're at and where they want to be. They may not want to do a whole lot, but they may want to just know how to text. And so meeting them where they're at is very important.
So first off, thank you.
Yeah.
What an amazing story. And I'm going to have to attend that class. I'm not sure I could make that digital Christmas card if I tried. So
No.
let me know when that class is offered. I'm going to join. So we have about 20 minutes left. So I want to spend a little time just engaging on digital literacy. So let's start with what are quick key barriers that are keeping some older adults from being digital literate? Anybody want to go first?
I can start.
Please.
I think one thing that our data really illustrates is that these barriers are multifaceted, right? So it's everything from access for some to confidence, to needing help, to using emerging technologies. And we do see, you know, these age differences, right? 65 and older are less confident, right? They're less likely to, say, own a smartphone. They're less likely to have heard about AI. But some, I really want to drive home that there are plenty of older adults who are still using these. And I think my colleagues have really pointed out the ways in which, you know, this is really specific to the local level, right? There are very emotional, social aspects when it comes to scams. And so I'd love to hear what you both have to say on that as well.
Yeah, I think some barriers that we see are physical limitations, dexterity in fingers. You'd be surprised as maybe they want to learn and maybe they don't know they can't push the buttons. Maybe they can't feel the buttons. We've seen that where, you know, they're having difficulty with that. Cognitive limitations as well, understanding what is this and connecting some of the different facets of technology. So we see that a lot with our seniors. And then fear. I think fear is a barrier. So generating those conversations, keeping them in a safe place will allow them to understand and kind of overcome those barriers that you see.
The only thing I would add on is to tag on to the fear aspect, especially when it comes to fraud prevention and teaching people about scams, is to not scare people with scams, right? There's a way to do education where you can use empowering messages and, you know, to really offer simple ways for people to protect themselves that they can actually accomplish. And that will hopefully bring down barriers, because I do feel like that fear of getting scammed, we can empower people without scaring them so much that they don't take advantage of technology.
And I can add to that, us as a trusted resource in the community, they believe what we say. And so if you are a trusted resource, you're able to encourage them to kind of move forward in their digital literacy journey and help them because they believe you. They're going to believe you. So I think that's important. Rather than bringing somebody in that doesn't know them, they're like, who are you? I don't want to listen to you. But if you're a trusted resource, they'll listen to you.
So, Melissa, let's talk. You talked a lot about scams, and I think that was very, very important. Let's talk about what do we do when somebody's been a victim? of a scam. It can be a very traumatizing experience if there's especially if there's a lot of money. People can feel very embarrassed about it. So what are some best practices about helping an older adult after they've experienced that fraud?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier about being careful about your language, how you talk to them, making sure that the language you use doesn't place blame on them, but places blame on the actual criminal who stole their money and personal information. We have found, AARP and FINRA did an incredible research project on this, where they were highlighting things in the media and things that are just said generally about financial fraud victims of woman gets duped. No, the woman didn't get duped, her money was stolen. So that's one thing, is just thinking about the way that we talk about it so that they don't feel worse about the situation. And then listening. Being an active listener is really, really important. And I will just tell you, all my colleagues and I speak to scam survivors a lot, but I have colleagues who do it a lot more than I do. And the one thing they tell me is people just want to be heard. They just want to tell their story to somebody who's going to listen, not interrupt, and it may, oftentimes it's not a family member or a friend. Sometimes they just don't want to tell someone close to them. They want to keep it close to their chest, and they need that third party. So if they need to, call one of the toll-free numbers. If it's a romance scam, there are peer-to-peer programs where they can actually meet other scam survivors, and that's really helpful. That will help them with that, not just the financial aspect of it, but that emotional sort of piece of the puzzle, which is really important, especially with romance scams, because there's the financial impact and there's the emotional impact, and they're very much tied together. And then give them their power back, by helping them take the steps they need to take, whether it's just reporting it to their bank, reporting it to, FBI, BBB, FTC. Taking those little steps to be able to just do that will help people feel better immediately, because they are taking a little bit of control back for themselves. Because what's happened is somebody's come in and sort of they've taken advantage. And so allowing somebody, helping them get to those places where they can protect themselves is really important. And thanking them for telling the story. If they do share the story with you, thank them and let them know that it's courageous that they did that. Acknowledge that. It's not easy. If you've been through this, telling somebody what happened, it can be a really hard thing to do. So the other thing is just to thank them for their story, let them know, reinforce the fact that this was not their fault at all, and tell them how brave they are for telling the story. But the other piece, like I said, is just getting them the next steps to take care of all of the impacts that they've experienced, like helping them with the financial impact and the emotional impact.
Yeah. Quick audience poll. How many people know somebody who's been a victim of a scam or fraud? I mean, I think that demonstrates this is not a singular problem. And this is, I really appreciate what you said earlier, this is a crime.
Yeah.
Let's stop victim blaming here.
Yeah.
So let's talk about social isolation. So we had a good conversation yesterday about social isolation. How does it play a role, and why does it matter in this conversation?
Yeah, I can share on that. I think starting with COVID, I think the whole world kind of had to go plunge into the digital world, right? Even our seniors. And they didn't know how to navigate that. So one of the things that we did, just to give you an example, we set up telebingo calls with our seniors. Our seniors didn't have access to computers. They didn't know how to use Zoom. But we had to do something. We had to do something to connect them and keep them engaged with their other seniors at their center. And so we set up telebingo calls through Teams, and we would have anywhere from 20 to 30 seniors on a call to do bingo. And so even that small amount of technology that we used to connect them mattered. That's what kept them connected. That's what kept them healthy. That's what kept them encouraged during that time where they were at home alone. And so we would do this throughout the week. We continued to do that, I think, for about 3 or 4 years until we reopened. And so digital literacy matters. We did have to show them how to dial, how to put in your code and stuff like that. But so even now, they're learning how to play games with their friends, you know, on technology apps. And so I think it's very important to keeping the seniors socialized and connected.
You go ahead.
Yeah, the only other thing I would add to that is I totally agree. I think that it is really critical for, to help people, you know, if they have mobility issues or whatever it is, to not be socially isolated. The other side of the equation there is in our research we found, as I mentioned earlier, that people who are lonely are more susceptible to scams. And so there's the flip side of that, which is let's make sure people have access so that they can, you know, build friendships and communities. Let's also then equip them with which is why this conversation is so critical, right? Is they also need the skills to protect themselves and know when to build those relationships and be very careful about that.
I think that's such an important point. And I also think, you know, you're talking about the pandemic, when you think about some of our findings where we asked people about the impact of the pandemic on their tech use. And I was really struck by the fact that half of Americans told us that, you know, their tech use is different now because of the pandemic. And that includes some older adults. It includes plenty of older adults. And so I think it's really important to think about how these things are shifting, and then also keep in mind the upsides and the downsides that come with isolation and connectedness or lack thereof.
So let's end on a positive note here. So we're 25 years in the future. NCOA is celebrating its 100th anniversary. Ramsey has just challenged us to look at the next 100 years. And yes, Ramsey, you're still here in 25 years. You're not going anywhere. In your dream scenario, what does the digital world look like for older adults? And, you know, including many of us today who will be older adults at that point, because we're all aging.
I would just start by saying that I think as technology advances, we know that the scammers are taking advantage of it. You know, anything that's new, crypto, you know, any kind of new technology. What I'm hopeful about, and I'm seeing in the folks who are working on the fraud issue, is that there's a lot of sectors, like the private and the public sector, are coming forward. They're coming together to figure out how to tackle this. They're starting to share more data and more information. And so while AI right now is sort of a scary part when it comes to fraud, I also think it can be the solution. I don't think we can put the onus of fraud prevention on consumers. I think we have to do more to stop scams before they reach people. And my hope is that over the next few years, we'll all be able to come together and use AI and all the other new technologies to stop scams from reaching people so that they can be free and use technology and build those relationships, if you will. That's my hope.
You know, I'm really struck by what you said. I think that people have a lot of concerns about AI, but there are also hopes. There are things that people are excited about. They're excited about efficiency, about making life better. And so I think there are probably some real benefits as well. I would say that, you know, for us, right, we see this as we hope that this will be a world where data continues to be key, right? When I think about all of you in this room, my other panelists who are really making decisions, even shaping policy, kind of shaping things on the ground. You know, we at Pew Research Center want to be able to bring Americans' voices into that conversation. And so we do that, you know, having that data and making sure that we're tracking new emerging technologies and the same divides that we've been seeing is really important. And I just think it is such an important part of the picture to know what is happening on the ground, right? What is happening in people's day-to-day experiences, meeting them where they are. I think that's where kind of the data is one thing, and then really interacting with people in their personal experiences is absolutely critical.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would hope AI would not take over, but I would hope that it would be used. I would hope that it'd be used as a tool to make things a little bit easier for seniors and for all of us. Something that will help them complete applications, something that will help them, you know, connect with their doctors easier. I mean, we have telehealth out there, but let's be realistic. The seniors are not using that. That's not, you know, that's not really the avenue that they're using. So I'm hoping there'll be a little bit easier tool as they learn in the future. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. First off, can we just have a quick appreciation for our panelists here? I mean, technology is ever changing, and digital literacy is going to be an ongoing need. And so this topic is going to be a continuous topic for us. But this is the area where we, as the AG Network, can have a play. We have a unique role. We provide the education, we are trusted, and we're where people go. And so I challenge all of us in the audience to think about, how do we take these topics, these lessons back home? And I know many of us, as we saw earlier, are dealing with this issue or have seen this issue directly. And I know you're seeing it with the older adults in your community. So I hope this has been helpful. We have more sessions following this, so please stick around. And you know, I just want to end where we started with thanks. Thank you for attending. Thanks for the connection, and thank you for all that you do every day to serve older adults in your communities. Have a wonderful rest of your conference.